From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. The Mexican prosecutor has confirmed one person who was part of the migrant caravan has died. The man in his 20s reportedly fell from a truck. The vehicle was heading towards the city of Huixtla. Thousands of migrants heading to the U.S. have left the town of Tapachula in Mexico towards the town of Huixtla. There are reportedly 3,000 migrants in the group that's leaving Tapachula. Another group of thousands is still trying to cross the border between Mexico and Guatemala. Mexican authorities have tried to stop the flow of migrants, but many have crossed the river in makeshift rafts. Authorities in Chiapas say that over the past 3 days, over 1,000 asylum requests have been processed at the border. Over 300 of the migrants have been relocated to federal shelters after being considered especially vulnerable. Authorities have said the government's main goal is to protect migrants' rights. Our correspondent in Mexico City, Eduardo Martinez, tells us more.
I'm in a fairground that the Mexican government turned into a shelter, but some migrants have said they haven't been able to communicate with their family members that were moved to these facilities. Social activists visited the shelters. They say there are over 1,000 people in there who cannot communicate with their loved ones and are not allowed to leave their premises. Activists have accused the government of making this shelter a migrant center, popularly known as migrant jails.
U.S. President Donald Trump has said his government will begin to cut aid to Central American countries for failing to stop the caravan. He also made claims that criminals and unknown Middle Easterns are mixed in with the migrants and that this is a national emergency. Those making up the caravan have responded to Trump's claims.
The only thing we're looking for is for an opportunity to reach the US, to be able to work. Most people here are poor. If we had the economic means to enter the US legally, then we wouldn't make this huge sacrifice, suffering the terrible heat. You saw what happened yesterday. People fainted from the heat.
Trump's tweet is very worrying. He doesn't know what we've suffered, as he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Well, we didn't. If he put himself in their shoes, it would be very different. If he walked what we walk, he never walks.
A UN spokesman has confirmed that over 7,000 people have joined the caravan. Farah Haq cited figures from the International Organization for Migration.
Large numbers of people are arriving in Mexico today and are likely to remain in the country for an extended period. And at this time, it is estimated that the caravan comprises some 7,233 persons, many of whom intend to continue the march north.
On Sunday, the caravan arrived to their first stop over the southern state of Chiapas.
From very early in the morning, thousands of migrants left the bordering city of Hidalgo. Step by step, they made the over 7-hour trek towards Tapachula, Chiapas.
We want them to support us, to support our children, women and men, to give us security and protection, because we left Honduras without anything.
With punishing 30-degree heat bearing down on them, they battled exhaustion, hunger, and blistered feet, but they refused to stop. The caravan pushes on to the promised land as they walked along Federal Road 200.
I'm making the journey so that I can have a better life, because there we can no longer live and survive there. The government does not help us. People are starving in Honduras, and the president does not help us at all.
Mexico's government closed the border bridge, but the people of Mexico stood in solidarity with the migrants and their cause and lent them assistance.
We all need help, and maybe we also have to migrate to another country at some point. So this is why we must also help others.
We ask the authorities to open the way for these people to cross because they are here in desperate need of help.
As they continued the 40-meter trek, migrants only stopped once. Federal police tried to persuade them to get into buses that, according to the commissioner, take them to shelters.
It's a big shelter. There are doctors, water, baths. We have assured them.
However, among the more than 5,000 Central American migrants, many mistrust and fear to be deported. People from the migrant caravan say they will only rest if absolutely necessary. They hope to arrive to the capital in less than 15 days.
Eduardo Martínez, Telesur.
The far-right candidate in Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, has promised to exile or imprison his opponents if they don't submit to the law. In a speech to supporters, the former army captain said that if elected, he will use the armed forces to combat any violence which might follow his election. He said he will seek permission from Congress. He also said he will use the army for street patrols and describe the country as being at war.
If this bunch want to stay here, they'll have to submit to our law. Otherwise, they'll have to leave or go to prison. These low-life Reds will be banished from our country.
But the president of the Workers' Party, Gleisi Hoffmann, says Brazil is facing a violent electoral process.
We want to talk about the seriousness of the situation, how serious the speech made yesterday in Paulista Avenue by candidate Jair Bolsonaro was. We have just given a press conference and we are asking for an audience with the OAS Commission that is accompanying the election to make an international report. We may be entering the extremely violent process in the election. What Bolsonaro did yesterday was to incite violence.
Different evangelical groups have created movements against the far-right candidate. They have instead thrown their support behind the Workers' Party candidate, Fernando Haddad. Reportedly, this was in reaction to a statement by some evangelical leaders who say people who truly believe in God should vote for Bolsonaro. However, for these movements, Bolsonaro represents violence, and they see him as the opposite of what the Bible teaches. Environmental analysts have also spoke out about Bolsonaro's economic policy. They said it's an ancient vision that sees the environment as an obstacle.
It represents a vision of the environment of maybe 50, 100 years ago, or even before that, of the 29th century. As those, we had to conquer the territory, instead of looking at the environment as an asset. Our biodiversity can generate multiple forms of wealth.
For his part, Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has been campaigning in the state of Maranhão. His supporters are calling for the defense of democracy and the recovery of the economy. Haddad told them there is still time to defeat the far-right campaign. The latest polls put Haddad just 6 points behind Bolsonaro, or at 47% against 53% for the far-right candidate. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemos, is following Haddad's campaign. He brings us details about the recent visit to a recycling plant.
Here in Sao Paulo, garbage processing is an enormous task. So the Kumare collective transforms garbage into recycled materials. Fernando Haddad has come to visit this plant to support the work of these people, and also to announce a 20% increase in subsidies for low-income families. He also announced a limit on the increase of the price of gas. This event is taking place after demonstrations in support of Jair Bolsonaro, which happened on Sunday in Paulista Avenue. It's worth mentioning that in a recent video, Jair Bolsonaro said that if he wins the presidency, he will sweep away the left wing. Various social movements have continued to reject Bolsonaro's candidacy and have stated that a meeting like today's with Haddad would not be able to happen if the far-right candidate were to win. That is why they say Sunday's vote is crucial. Another video surfaced this weekend, this time of Jair Bolsonaro's son, lawmaker Eduardo Bolsonaro, where he warns a possible shutdown of Brazil's Supreme Electoral Court and possibly imprisoning the court's judges.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Almost 800 organizations and social leaders in Colombia have asked Pope Francis to ask President Iván Duque to resume the peace talks. In a letter, they asked the Pope to support the dialogue. Activists also say the government, the church, and the United Nations had to examine the process 70 days ago, but it hasn't happened yet. Pope Francis has met with Colombian President Iván Duque in the Vatican. They discussed the reintegration of FARC members into society. the peace dialogue with the National Liberation Army, and church contribution to the process. They also addressed ways to protecting social leaders.
We can resume the dialogue with the National Liberation Army, but only if their members agree to free all those kidnapped and to ending violence and criminal actions.
Former Ecuadorian Vice President Jorge Glass has started a hunger strike after being moved to a new prison. Glass lawyer Eduardo Franco Loor has confirmed the strike on Twitter. Glass was sentenced to 6 years in prison for allegedly receiving illicit payments from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. Earlier, Loor condemned the conditions in which the former vice president is being held.
We are making the authorities responsible for the life and well-being of Jorge Glass. He is not in good health, and now his rights are being violated, mainly his right for mediation in front of a judge. Glass has requested the annulment of his sentence given his innocence. We are condemning this violation of his human rights and sending complaints to the UN and the IACHR.
Still in Ecuador, a trans woman was reportedly tortured and murdered in the province of Cotopaxi. According to trans activists, the woman was attacked by 5 people who threw stones at her. She eventually died from her injuries. Transgender rights organizations are demanding the government find the killers and guarantee the safety of members of the LGBTQ community. A U.S. Navy hospital ship has arrived to Ecuador to provide medical assistance with the help of over 900 crew members. The ship is also expected to visit Peru, Colombia, and Honduras. Our correspondent Denise Herreras has the details.
Hello, yes, indeed. We are outside the authority port on the Ecuadorian coast in the province of Esmeraldas, where the U.S. Navy hospital ship arrived. The USNS Comfort will conduct a medical assistance mission as part of the U.S. Promise Assistance among all South America. Health officials will select patients with medical needs to be evaluated on board. Around 750 patients will be strengthened by the U.S. authorities, but despite this communication, people here outside the authority port are demanding irregularities among this process. They say the Ecuadorian authorities and also the U.S. authorities, they didn't give their needs to be treated in this hospital ship. It is the 6th deployment to provide medical assistance in the region, and also this hospital ship will visit Peru, Colombia, and Honduras. This is all we have for now. Back to you at the studio.
Thank you, Denise, for that report. At least 7 people have died after Tropical Storm Vincent hit southern Mexico. Rivers burst its banks after torrential rains, trapping people in floating homes. The storm has registered winds of 45 miles per hour. It is expected to weaken in the coming days. Hundreds of families across Trinidad and Tobago are in cleanup mode. This after massive flooding destroyed many neighborhoods. A national disaster was declared after heavy rains over the weekend. As relief efforts continue, there is also a flood of goodwill. Many caring citizens have opened their doors to those left homeless. Regional leaders stand ready to assist Trinidad and Tobago after massive flooding devastated several communities on the island. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has been contacted by the leaders of Venezuela, Jamaica, Barbados, Dominica, and Grenada. He expressed thanks, but he indicated that the government is coping for the moment. Our correspondent Kitchen Hayes is in La Horqueta, Trinidad, and has more details.
It's day 2 of the massive cleanup exercise happening in Greenfield. As you can see, this is a major exercise where not just residents but hundreds of volunteers are out helping to clean, and it's not being made any easier. As you can see, the rain is coming down once again. Now, the government has allocated $25 million for this cleanup exercise. Many are saying that's not enough. As you can see, every house on this street, every house all over is completely destroyed and most people have lost all of their possessions. The government of Trinidad and Tobago also reaching out to regional bodies to collect some more money to help with the insurance and the rebuilding efforts. So a lot of work being done here. Now, this is just one section. This is East Trinidad. There are reports of flooding in South, Central, and further east Trinidad. So this is a mammoth national disaster, as the Prime Minister called it. Highways have only just reopened and very few people went out to work today. Most people either trying to get their stuff fixed or just could not leave their homes. They've been marooned. So this is, again, a lot of work that needs to be done, and this is just the beginning.
Thank you, Kijan, for that report. A fair in the Dominican Republic is showcasing the many rich traditions of the island.
Expo Culture 2018 is presenting the Cibao in Santo Domingo. It's an artisanal fair in which native Dominican costumes and traditions are put on display for the entire community.
This expo brings together 10 provinces from the Cibao region to showcase the region's art, its popular artists, their paintings, their handcrafts, their gastronomy, and their poetry.
Cibao is a region located in the northern part of the Dominican Republic. The word means place where rocks flourish, and it is the way native Dominicans refer to the island.
We consider Puerto Plata as the museum city. It is the tourism capital, and above all, is the gateway for the culture of America.
One of the main attractions of Puerto Plata are the majestic colonial-style homes that were inspired by English designs.
In 1976, there were 358 colonial-style houses. Currently, there are only 129 left. 19 of them are in ruins, which is a shame. They are beautiful historical relics that cannot be abandoned.
National and international visitors come and enjoy Dominican traditions.
We are here celebrating that Cibao traditions are here in Santo Domingo. The region is represented by its culture, gastronomy and handicrafts for everyone to enjoy.
This event remains emblematic for maintaining the culture of a very important region of the Dominican Republic.
October 22nd in Argentina marks 41 years of unceasing effort by the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo to find their missing family members. These women have been relentless in their struggle to find more than 500 grandchildren who went missing during the last military dictatorship. Over 40 decades of searching, 128 granddaughters and grandsons have been identified. This also drives the process of justice related to the right to identity. Hundreds of citizens in Mexico are dressing up as La Catrina, or the Elegant Skull, and marching through the streets of Mexico City. This is in preparation for the Day of the Dead.
The day when the dead roam the streets is getting closer. It's one of the most famous holidays in the Mexican calendar. The Day of the Dead is celebrated towards the end of October and the beginning of November.
This celebration is quite colorful. It reminds you of your roots and makes you think of the path ahead. Life is short and it needs to be enjoyed to the fullest.
Like many others across the country, Jose Barreto takes advantage of the holiday to show his creative side. Dressing up as a Catrina, a term coined by the famous Mexican printmaker Jose Guadalupe Posada to describe what he called the elegant death.
We dress up as a Catrina to embody some extravagance to call attention to ourselves.
Anthropologists say that death has been celebrated for over 1,000 years before the Spanish conquest. On the Day of the Dead, traditions are being upheld and celebrated by Mexicans since childhood.
We celebrated this day. Since I was a kid, I remember always paying homage to the dead.
The aim of this celebration is to provide an alternative perspective on one of life's most difficult subjects, death.
We try to see death in a more cheerful way, not as a tragedy, but as another step in the cycle of life, as a new stage that can be joyful and colorful.
Besides dressing up, colorful altars with floral arrangements are made. This is the way Mexicans celebrate their love of life and death.
We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. A vehicle that could belong to the Saudi consulate has been found in a garage park in Istanbul. Turkish police say the abandoned car was found in the suburbs and seems to include a diplomatic number plate. Authorities continue to investigate the death of journalist Jamal Kashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. On Friday, Saudi authorities admitted that Khashoggi died in the premises. Cameroon has re-elected Paul Biya as president for a 7th presidential term. Biya has ruled the country since 1982. Violence in the polls increased after allegations for widespread fraud. Biya is the second African leader who has been in power for so long after the Equatorial Guinea president Teodoro Obiang.
I hereby proclaim that the following candidate, who will be President of the Republic, and also the candidate who received the majority of the vote, is the candidate Biya Paul.
Nigerian Pure Biafra leader Nnamdi Kanu has revealed he is in Israel after missing for years. He has called on his followers to boycott Nigeria's upcoming elections. A unilateral declaration of independence by the Igbo people in 1967 sparked a brutal civil war that left more than 1 million dead. The Zambian government has revived plans to slaughter up to 2,000 hippos in the next 5 years. The government suspended the plans in 2016 after protests by animal rights activists, but authorities say the plan will continue because the hippo population could not be supported by the water levels in the Luganga River. They say moving them elsewhere will be too costly. Russia has said that it will be forced to respond in kind if the U.S. starts developing new missiles after quitting the INF Treaty. The Kremlin said quitting the Cold War Area Treaty will raise the possibility of a worldwide arms race. The treaty was originally signed in 1987 and required the elimination of short and immediate-range nuclear and conventional missiles by both countries.
Any action in this field will be met with an appropriate response because strategic stability can be secured only on the basis of parity, and parity will be kept under all circumstances. We bear responsibility for global stability and expect the U.S. to bear its share of the responsibility.
Thousands of unclaimed urns are piling up across Japan in the back of city offices. The identities of the dead are usually known and were cremated at public expense, but in most cases the remains have been collected by relatives despite the request to do so. The abandoned remains highlight social, economic, and demographic changes in Japan, where more elderly live on welfare and families are more scattered. Armenia's capital, Yerevan, has celebrated its 2,800th birthday. Over the weekend, residents rejoiced over the birthday of their city, celebrating with traditional Armenian dance and music. Founded in the 8th century before Christ, Yerevan was originally called Erubuni and is one of the oldest capitals in the world. And we come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.